March 18th, 2025. I'm going to call this regular meeting of Littleton City Council to order. City Clerk, roll call, please.
Mayor Schlachter.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Barr.
Here.
Councilmember Driscoll. Here. Councilmember Grove. Here. Councilmember Peters.
Here.
Councilmember Reichard.
Here.
Councilmember Zink.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Please rise as you are able for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, before we approve the agenda here, I just want to make an announcement that we are having some technical difficulties with our vote counting system. I'm unable to control it, and I don't think anything will appear up on the screen with that per se when we can vote. So we are going back to old times, and we are using yellow or green and red pieces of paper to vote. Green will be for yes when we get to a vote, and red will be for no. Just confirming that. Hopefully we'll get a new device for voting soon. All right, item 3 on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Council's had a chance to review said agenda. Any changes? Seeing no changes, is approved without objection. Item 4, proclamations. We have none tonight. Item 5, public comment. Public comment is a time for community members to come express opinions regarding issues that are not part of public hearings on an agenda. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. I'll let you know when you hit your 3 minutes. We expect comments to be civil. Disrespectful, disruptive behavior will not be tolerated. City Council is not authorized under Colorado Open Meeting Laws to take action at this meeting on any issue raised by public comment that's not part of tonight's agenda. I may refer matters to the attorney or city manager for feedback. When you get up here, please state your name and your address. First up, we have Ned Stern.
Good evening. My name's Ned Stern. I live at 1981 West Briarwood Avenue, Littleton. Our group opposes the city's plan to concrete the railroad spur trail, crusher fine trail that parallels the north side of Mineral Avenue between the Highline Canal Trail and Jackass Hill Road. We have spoken with over 100 trail users, and their first question is always why? Why does the city want to do this? Well, yeah, why would the city decide to destroy one of Littleton's premier soft trails by replacing it with a 16-foot wide swath of concrete that will cost upwards of $725,000? Why, when this corridor already has a paved sidewalk along the south side of Mineral Avenue, dedicated and soon to be protected bike lanes along Mineral Avenue, dedicated bike lanes along Long Avenue, and a crusher fines trail that works beautifully for walkers, runners, and bikers? The trail users either prefer no concrete or a dual surface trail with parallel 8-foot wide crusher fines and concrete lanes like what is present along the Mary Carter Greenway. If you don't believe us, conduct your own unbiased survey and find out what your community wants. Like South Suburban found out with their survey regarding concreting the Lee Gulch Trail, respondents preferred crusher fines over concrete by a margin of 2.3 to 1. Even your own very limited survey for this project showed the community preferred a dual surface path over all concrete by a margin of 3.5 to 1. So direct our city manager to prepare a change order that will save between $200,000 and $725,000 and have it ready for city council consideration on April 1st. Some of you seem to consider preserving our crusher fine trails a low priority. Let me assure you that your community feels otherwise. We have spoken with people who drive a half hour or more just to walk on Littleton's soft trails. If the city and South Suburban insist on concreting existing and future trails, we will be forced to do the same. to get in our cars and drive to a soft trail. We don't want to do that. Concrete is not a surface we ever want to walk or run on. Make this right, abandon the current all-concrete plan, and understand that we value and will fight to protect and expand Littleton's superb soft trail system. We invite you to join our effort by emailing saveourfindstrails@gmail.com and join SOFT, our Soft Alliance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ned. Next up is Greg Sullivan.
Good evening, Council. Greg Sullivan, District 4. I want to give you a canvas report. 2,500 flyers on doors, 200 signatures on the petition for a different environmental plan for Mineral Place. That's a significant number of people, okay, that are selling you and telling everyone that it's a bad decision that you're making there. You can correct it still. Citizens have emailed Mrs. Flies at Costco, and citizens have emailed you. I don't know how many, but I know quite a few. Comments that I've gotten from the citizens about the 32 gas pumps, which is what I'm here to talk about, which is to say no to 32 gas pumps. One person said, I've never heard about 32 gas pumps being installed. Why 32 pumps? We need more EV stations and less gas pumps. It's not fair that Costco can have 32 pumps when all the other gas stations around have got 12. Obviously, something anti-competitive is going on, something that's really under the radar here. Children are our most valuable possession, and we must take care of them. Air pollution and road pollution at Mineral Place with 32 gas pumps is a killing field for our children. Children at the schools, at the daycare center, which are nearby. Pediatric cancer is on the rise from air pollution. MP 2.5, NO2, and other pollutants created by Mineral Place, both from fuel, car traffic, and the roads themselves. I gave you a publication to look on environmental pollution and the risk of childhood cancer. It's happening. It's real. Get real with this. The fuel center, proposed 32 gas pump, is designed like a truck stop. It should be up on I-25, like Buc-ee's. This is an infill. Why do you have 32 gas pumps in our neighborhood? Completely ridiculous. You made the place look like an outlet mall. I just can't believe it. I went to see on Climate Action Day at the state capitol. I met with Representative Gretchen Ryden. I told her about the 32 pumps. You know what she said? I believe we dropped the ball on this. I believe we dropped the ball. So my recommendations again, reduce the fuel center from 32 to 12, add more EV stations. Land recaptured by the downsizing of the fuel center would allow for significant green buffer, not some whitewash where you're putting up some trees. Go up on the airport and see what they've done there. It's nothing, these trees. Take the 70,000 trees, the $70,000 you've got from trees from removing, and start up the Littleton Tree Trust. Use that money at Mineral Place. Don't pass it out to other neighborhoods. We need it in our neighborhood. You've been shown and you've been presented ways to protect us in our environment and still have a Costco. You have ignored them. For 6 months I've talked to you, you ignored them. The social costs are amazing. You're ignoring them.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you.
Next up is Paul Bohm.
My name is Paul Bohm. I live at 5657 South Forest Hill Street, down the street from the newest brewery in town, which is what I would like to visit with you about. I appreciate particularly your response so quickly, Mr. Mayor, to a letter that I sent to several of you that has more details than I'm going to just hit the highlights tonight. I would like my letter to be entered into the minutes. I have a copy of that. But I'm here to entreat you to consider solving a problem. Parking is one of the issues that I would like to bring up. We are 2 doors down from the new brewery, and as I included in my letter, the parking so far has been for about 5 blocks, both sides of our street. Strangely, most residents buy a house thinking that they're entitled to park in front of their house, not a block and a half away. If you have guests that want to come and you say, well, you'll have to park on Elmwood and then find Forest Hill Street, is kind of a challenge. Some of the issues that I see with not addressing this parking issue with the brewery is there are people with physical limitations on our block. There's someone with MS, and he has no garage, he has no driveway, and he needs to park in front of his house. He is not able to hike to get into his house. My wife is going to have knee surgery, and she needs to be able to park and get into a vehicle on the curb. And as it has been for the last 8 days, that won't happen. So I bring up this, several other issues just to highlight. With the congestion that's there right now, trash pickup, we watched people move our trash bin back on the curb or on the grass so they could pull into a parking place. Thinking about things like street sweeping, we're entitled to that, and that may actually disappear. The other issue that I would quickly like to touch on is privacy. When the plans were first outlined for the brewery, when they were going to go level up the deck, my impression was that there would be a wall to buffer sound, and they stopped about 15 to 20 feet short. I took a picture, I can show it to you if you want to, but people sitting there having their brew and their pizza can look into at least 4 yards. I took a picture from my patio, and I could see everybody that was on the deck for the first probably 10 or 15 feet.
Thank you, Mr. Boehm. That's
Okay,
3
thank you
minutes.
very much for your attention.
Next up, we have Rick Pilgrim.
Good evening. My name is Rick Pilgrim. I live at 5191 Bomar Drive in the town of Bomar. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I wanted to introduce myself because I'm a board candidate for the South Suburban Parks and Recreation Board. That election, if you're not aware, South Suburban sends out the little, spring and fall program. On page 2 is the description of how you have to vote. And I think that's important because there's more than 115,000 residents in the district and only about 2,300 vote. So you have to vote in person or by absentee ballot. You can request an absentee ballot and then mail that back in, and that needs to be in their hands by the end of April. I'm a former mayor from the town of Bomar. I grew up in Littleton. I actually learned to ski on the South Suburban bus in the late 60s. It was $4 for the bus and $4 for the lift ticket, so we all took advantage of that. And having gone to junior high and high school here, and then my adult life, I'm very familiar with the area, and I'm learning a number of the issues that will confront the board, and so I'm listening and paying attention to that. If you go to the district website, they've got all of the board candidates. There are now 11, and there is 1 incumbent. So you can see each of our statements there and the way that we could be contacted. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to introduce myself.
Thank you, Mr. Pilgrim. Next up is Marianne Combs.
And I reside at 1949 West Arapahoe Road, Councilwoman Peters District, with my husband, toddler, 3-month-old baby, and dog. I am here tonight to address the council on 2 issues that are very different, but I think both relate to the quality of life here in our city. The first is the city's decision to proceed with paving the spur trail on Mineral Avenue despite the lack of advance notice to the public and the public's subsequent opposition. I'm not going to repeat all the reasons why I believe this is a bad idea. I think that Mr. Stern and some of my other fellow citizens have done a good job of bringing this to the council's attention. Instead, I just want to express my displeasure with the city's stated reason for doing so, as reported in the Littleton Independent. As I understand it, the city has to spend the money allocated to paving this path, or they will lose it. I don't believe this is a good reason for paving the trail. If the city is worried about losing grant money, find some other way to spend it, and spend it in a way that actually provides a benefit to the community or fulfills a need. I understand that city council and city staff often have to make unpopular decisions for health and safety reasons or to comply with a state law, but paving this path does not fall into any of those categories. So I urge the council to be responsive to the wants and needs of its citizens and to do what it can to reverse this decision. The second issue I would like to address is more serious. Someone in my family heads out every morning on the Lee Gulch Trail. Yesterday morning, my husband discovered at least 7 swastikas drawn on the trail from Prince Street to Windermere. These were reported by us to the Littleton Police and the South Suburban Parks District and were removed later that day. We also reported it as a hate crime to the Anti-Defamation League. Unfortunately, this morning, the swastikas were back again and were spotted all the way from Prince Street to Elodie Street, and several were located around Charlie Emily Park, the park where we take our children to play several times a week. We were shocked and disgusted to see a hate act in our neighborhood 2 days in a row. Now, I assume and hope that it's unnecessary for me to list all the reasons why this is deplorable and concerning, but I am bringing this to your attention because you are the leaders of our community, and I am asking you to use your positions of power to do 2 things. 1, try to make sure that we find out who perpetrated these acts of hate, and 2, and perhaps more importantly, set the tone for our community. Make clear that anti-Semitism has no place here. I hope that you will take this seriously. Thank you for your service to our city and for the opportunity to address you tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Combs. Next up is Kelly Milliman.
Good evening, Council. Kelly Milliman, 2282 West Briarwood Avenue, District 4. I actually wasn't going to speak tonight, but I have 2 things I want to say. One is my coat is shedding. Secondly, I'd like to thank the Littleton Police Department for being present at a local protest that I was involved in this past weekend. It was nice to see them there. It was a peaceful protest, and it felt comforting to have our Littleton police officers there, so thank you very much for that. The other thing I wanted to tell you is if I look like and I smell like I just came from an animal shelter, that's exactly what I am. I volunteer at the local animal shelter. It's the Humane Society of the South Platte Valley. It's just right across the street, right across Santa Fe from here. And it is within the city of Littleton's boundaries. I know that it's a nonprofit group. I don't think that the city gives any money to the shelter. I don't think. It's a very small shelter, but it's a mighty shelter, and it serves a very important need within our community. There are a lot of animals that need to be adopted. Dogs, cats, sometimes they get rabbits, guinea pigs. A lot of those animals do come from out of state. A lot of them come from Texas and New Mexico. I guess what I'm asking you then, with all the chaos and uncertainties that are going on at a national level right now, if for some reason that shelter becomes in need of extra funds, that the city, if you had any extra funds laying around, please consider to donate that to the animal shelter, because they really do play a big role within our community. So thank you, and I'm sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Milliman. Next up is Tammy Whitney.
Good evening. Tammy Whitney, District 4. Also going to say I'm the president of Rooted in Littleton. I'd like to show you guys something. that I picked up at your retreat this weekend, and that's why I'm speaking tonight. In the middle of this beautiful tree is the most important thing I think we need to do as city council. I heard something about it, community engagement. I'm here tonight because after attending the city council Saturday retreat, a couple of issues became apparent to me. First, from listening to city council members about boards and commissions, there seems to be a lack of communication that needs to be addressed. Kyle, thank you very much, said, "I don't like hearing about it at the grocery store or in the Littleton Report." That is exactly how we as citizens feel, time and time again. Or when we're watching someone pave a trail that we walk every day of our life and wonder, why did we not know how this was going on? I thought about that, and I thought about the spur trail. I thought they probably put a sign there with a little thing that I was supposed to take a picture of while I was running, while I was riding my bike, while I was walking my dog, or riding my horse. Stop, take a picture, then I will know what is going on the spur trail. It doesn't work that way. We need to have better communication from our city council. Like you, the citizens need to know about things before the decisions are being made. We do not like to get up here and have to say over and over again, stop. We don't. We don't like to waste money. We don't like to waste time. We really do want to work with you. And so in regards to the spur trail, think again. If there is cement that needs to be dumped somewhere, Kyle, you told me, you told us at the city meeting, you would like the sidewalks to be wider on the way to schools. Put the cement there. Please don't put it on a Crusher Fines trail. I'm going to ask you one more time to just really concentrate on community engagement. We need to work with you. We need to work with the city. We want to move this city forward, and we want to move it forward with the nice little sign that was on downtown Littleton Street banner when I rode in tonight, small town charm. That's what it says. That's what we want. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Whitney. Next up is Pam Chadbourne.
Good evening, Council. My name is Pam Chadbourne, a little block and a half from here. So, yeah, first, just to follow up, I totally agree. Regarding Costco, the city blew it, and I think it's not too late. You really should direct staff to try to influence this development and improve it. Second, the South Suburban Parks and Recollection. I just want to mention that we also belong to the South Metro Fire District, Fire Rescue District. And they send ballots to like 150 households in their district. Why can't South Suburban Parks and Rec do that? It's a decade late that they should have been sending ballots to everyone. The city, the Environmental Stewardship Board is taking a position on this. They're sending it to you. Council, push this forward, make it public, and get that happening, that we get ballots, for all of us get ballots for South Suburban Parks and Rec. Thirdly, for community engagement, I'm going to mention something. Denver has an inter-neighborhood cooperation group. 1975 and in 1979, they passed an ordinance for registered neighborhood organizations, and it's ZAP, Zoning and Planning. Zoning and Planning informs the group before they start on a project, when the project is in a concept phase. And you know what? Our city could and should have been doing that for the DDA process and all of these hidden processes where a year before the project comes forward, a special stakeholder group is formed out of sight. It is invariably the stakeholders are people who want to do something in that area. Is it balanced by an equal number of residents or even more residents who are impacted by that? No, the stakeholder groups are not. The city and council, you can do better in terms of making us aware of projects at the concept phase. Last night at Historic Preservation, I was appalled. For one thing, the regular meeting was turned to a study session, so no public comment could be made. The view graphs weren't included in the packet. And I am right outside the little pink area that is defined as the impacted area. You think I'm not affected? I am. And so I want to add my voice to the fact that we are not being informed about stuff that affects us. And for some reason, over and over, our staff says, oh, but that's the way we do it. Don't accept this. It is not acceptable. Let's see, finally, I want to say, please do not act on the SMHO request. Give or reduce it, and give $150,000 of that to Meadowwoods Cooperative Group. Meadowwood is going to pay utilities for that. It's going to come right back to the city. So give $150,000 of that SMO, just reduce that question and give it to Meadowwood. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chadbourne. Next up, last person to sign up is Ed Carr.
Hello, Ed Carr, District 2, and thank you for the opportunity to speak before you all. A couple of you, two of you, I'm a constituent of yours, and one of them I spoke with earlier today. I'll try to keep this brief, because I sure wasn't earlier, so thank you for the time. I appreciate you hearing me out. As you are all aware, or are now, thanks to someone else here this evening, we have a new watering hole here in town, and Mayor Schlachter, I believe you yourself indulged in the offerings over the weekend and soaked up the experience on the rooftop deck. And while looking towards the westward view, you may not have noticed to the north, completely full Forest Hill Street and others to the east and west. And there are just some challenges with that, and I realize it's a new business and people want to check it out and things will probably simmer down a little bit. Nevertheless, the brewery has 7 parking spots total, one of which allotted for handicap. And it's my understanding the city of Littleton is working towards eliminating the permit parking program, which I find to be unfortunate and frustrating. If there ever was a need for permit parking consideration, it would be this neighborhood. I know there were some similar concerns when plans for the Cherry Cricket were drawn, but at least that business has a legitimate parking lot. And I realize the Cherry Cricket has a permit or is licensed to operate as a restaurant, and the brewery, of course, is permitted to operate as a brewery. However, it's worth noting, they did fly a pizza oven in from Italy. Got a couple pies, burger, a couple dogs, some appetizers, fries. I mean, kind of sounds like a restaurant to me. Would have been nice for a little more consideration on the parking situation to occur when that was planned, either by the community and or the developers. Nevertheless, here we are, and there's a real need for this parking issue to be investigated. So I even read it on the website that they're doing away with the program. I mean, just because it's on a website doesn't necessarily mean things like that are set in stone. I would implore you all to consider opening that back up for examination and review. I understand that maybe the juice might not be worth the squeeze with all that goes into administering such a thing. It does have a huge impact for certain residents in certain areas. Even when things do calm down and settle in, I still expect the parking situation to be quite challenging. I'm pretty close to the brewery, and even when things do settle into a norm, I don't think that's going to help me very much. On Forest Hill, about 20% of the homes have a parking or have a driveway. I'm not fortunate enough to be one of those people. And
Thank you, Mr.
that's all the time I
Carr.
got. Thank you.
That's all we have signed up on the list. Is there anybody else in the audience that would wish to speak? Frank, please, when you come up to the mic, please state your name and address.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Frank Atwood, and I live in District 4. And as I understand it, now that the city has 15 feet on the south side of the white fence for the access between Prince Street and Highline Canal, I would like to present the city with $150. The city. Thank you. City for $150 for crusher fine for a path now. If the Highline Canal path is not concrete, why should the access path be concrete? Correlation is not necessarily causation. Is it a coincidence that the decision was reached only after a private citizen clarified the county records and considered a CORA request for some secret agreement, and two, that another citizen threatened to deliberately trespass to clarify the issues? Who knows? Correlation is not necessarily causation. Third, I do have a half dozen fence posts, and I'm sure that the owner on the north side would gladly give you a barbed wire for the longest length of the path in order to now create the path, even though it might have to be remodified by South Suburban. You still have an opportunity to do that between now and the current election, that 4 seats will be up for vote. Incumbents should be on notice that some citizens would like access there. This weekend, I happened to be watching the movie Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, in which a demolition crew comes through the planet Earth and decides to blow it up in order for an expressway in the galaxy. Part of me just feels, am I living that? But on the contrary, we're putting up roadblocks on access and perpetuating them into next year rather than addressing them right now. I'm grateful to see South Suburban participate, candidates come forward, and I encourage individuals to vote. Thank you. Thank you, City Council.
Thank you, Mr. Atwood. Is there anybody else in the audience that did not sign up that would wish to speak to council tonight? All right. Seeing no one, we will continue on. All right, items for comments and report for City Council. We'll start with Councilmember Driscoll.
No report.
Councilmember Zink.
I just wanted to say, at the Arts and Culture Board meeting this past week, last Thursday, I think it was, we had a fantastic presentation from Sarah Dusenberry on the sort of architectural history of the Littleton Boulevard area. I just thought it was fantastic, thought it was eye-opening. That's a public meeting, so anyone can come to any of our board and commission meetings. It was a very, very cool presentation. I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Peters.
I'll just say 2 quick things. I think our representative who was running for South Suburban left, but I wanted him to know that we have been pushing that hard and we would like to see more people get involved in that. And then is it also possible to respond if someone, I know public streets are public parking, but if someone needed a handicap pass and doesn't have a driveway, can they get a parking spot in front of their home? If they have an actual registered disability or need a temporary pass, perhaps?
So I would say, no, we wouldn't designate a section on a public street for an individual property owner's parking. There is a neighborhood parking program that the city does have. I'm not sure what the status of that, of whether or not we've used that for some time. I don't know if Mr. Beckelberg wants to chime in on that.
Yes, that is true. And since the question came up, I would just say that I'm not aware that we have, ceased that program. I won't say that it's not on a website somewhere, but I'm going to look into that because it's not the case that we've terminated the program. So we'll clarify that. We are looking into, all of the needs for the neighborhood. We're certainly, the first thing that the city's doing on that topic, Mayor, I guess I will just speak to this, is parking enforcement. That's something we're looking to beef up quickly through some kind of less traditional means. So that's one thing we can do. We are exploring other options that could help that situation, so.
Thank you. Anything else,
So
Councilmember Peters?
just to clarify my comments, so, yeah, the neighborhood parking program would be basically a permit-based parking system, if you will. That is something that I believe the city has done in the past in various locations. We would also, in terms of conferring kind of a private right, if you will, we would do that for certain types of, handicap parking would be something, in very extenuating circumstances, that could be something we could designate on a public street for that specific purpose that may happen to benefit a particular person because of that need. So.
Councilmember Rickert.
I want a couple things. First of all, I want to just say thank you to my colleagues on the council. We had a very successful retreat, and I really appreciate the work that we were able to do and the fellowship that we had together. I think it was a good use of our time. And I actually appreciate the citizen bringing up the swastikas being painted on trails. That happened 8 years ago after the last election, and after that election, the swastikas were painted on the along the High Line Canal. And at that time, I was on the board of LPS, and LPS actually helped remove those. And I want to say thank you to my former colleagues on the LPS Board of Education who worked, who with me 8 years ago, and then last week passed their all means all board policy. And I want to read a section of that board policy that speaks to what the citizens said around setting the tone. And I want to just praise my colleagues at LPS for doing this. I think it's a valuable statement for our community. So the all means all is a longer policy than what that I'm going to read, but I'm just going to read the introduction. In LPS, we are committed to the idea that all means all. All students, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, disability, twice the sectionality, students who are gifted, immigrants, English language learners, LGBTQ, homeless, poor, affluent, and those who may have social, emotional, and behavioral or academic challenges matter. All students are welcome in our schools. And I just want to say thank you to the LPS board for reaffirming that.
Councilmember Grove.
Yes, I want to encourage everybody to get an absentee ballot or go vote for South Suburban candidates for the board. There's 3 positions open and 1 incumbent is applying. To that end, on April 3rd, there'll be a candidate forum at Kiln put on by the Littleton Chamber, and that's from 5 to 7. So if you want to go hear what these people stand for in a little more detail than what you can find on the website, I encourage you to go. Last weekend, we had a retreat and a lot of good discussion. And one thing we learned is how difficult it is to plant trees in an urban setting and how you need to have the right kind of irrigation. We just miss our trees so much in downtown Littleton, think we should just plant them, but it's really not that easy. And we saw big holes with very elaborate irrigation systems and ways to put them in and ways to take them out. So among other things that we discussed, I thought that was a very interesting learning experience and something that we will need to apply here as we hopefully will plant trees in the future. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that Councilmember Peters and I are going to have a citizen meeting, and that will be on April 12th at 10 o'clock. Right now, it's at the Bemis Library. We're a little concerned about the elevator, and if the elevator is not working, we'll put a sign and we'll have it over the museum, but it'll be in the area. And we hope you can come, and we will have donuts and coffee.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I got a couple of announcements tonight. So first off, I wanted to I think Councilmember Riker kind of said the right words with regards to symbolism of hate being portrayed throughout the city. I don't think there's anything more that I need to particularly say on the subject other than thank you for saying the words that you did, and wholeheartedly agree. It's a travesty that this is something we and our LPD are taking seriously and having to deal with. Second, on I'm going to kind of pivot to some more environmental news. So our Environmental Stewardship Board met this month and is currently working on a South Suburban operating agreement that is really heavily influenced by the principles that the ESB would like to include in terms of sustainability practices, metrics, indicators, and programs that South Suburban could very easily take on. I also want to compliment the city manager's office and the city and our council for putting forward some recommendations for the hiring of the next South Suburban Parks and Rec executive director. For that person to have an emphasis in being sustainability minded. We know that SSPRD has really heavily focused on some really fantastic facilities, and now we think that this is a great moment to pivot towards looking at our parks, trails, and open space as a matter of kind of upping our sustainability game. So I appreciate the ESB's comments with regards to the hiring for that executive director. And we're looking forward to their talking to us about the operating agreement that they've helped draft at their upcoming council and ESB meeting in April. Second, Denver Regional Council of Governments decarbonization program. We had a meeting this last Friday prior to our city council retreat. I was really pleased with the outcomes of that meeting. In particular, this part of the program was talking about the Building Policy Collaborative, essentially looking at decarbonization policies for our residential, commercial energy codes, as well as our public facilities. I just wanted to say too that as part of this, like their program is moving extremely fast. They have extremely talented staff on board. And they are already in the process of not only releasing grant applications for which Arapahoe Douglas Works hopefully is going to be applying for some of the decarb program in their workforce development sector. I just wanted to let our city staff know, and I'll be talking to the ESB about this in the upcoming meetings. There is a jurisdictional support program. It's about $34.8 million worth of funding that is going to be going directly to the municipalities within the DRCOG region. And essentially, this money is going to be roughly for a city the size of Littleton, about $600,000 over 4 years to work on decarbonization policies regarding our energy codes, embedded carbon. Embedded carbon is not currently part of this. It is primarily dealing with energy and HVAC codes, trying to get more of our residential, commercial, and public buildings into heat pump programs, which is another obvious primary goal of this decarb program. But I'm really excited to say that there's this fantastic and well-funded and long-term opportunity that's coming up. In March, they are currently putting together the metrics for it to see how much funding is going to be available to each jurisdiction. And July through September, they'll be soliciting applications. So I'm looking forward to seeing us throw our hat in the ring for an application and to bolster this really much-needed part of our environmental programming. As we heard on our retreat, we have a large number of public facilities under the city's management. I want to say it's like 40-something, but I could be wrong. But a lot of them are coming to term. They're getting quite old. They are incredibly expensive and difficult to operate after a certain lifespan. They have all exceeded that lifespan. So I'm very hopeful that we can use some of this additional funding coming out of the decarb program to really set the future for what our buildings, our facilities, as well as our residential and commercial energy codes are going to look like. So that was all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. It's been a while since I've been up here. I missed the last meeting 2 weeks ago. And I was going to say thank you for filling in, but I'm going to blame you for breaking the buttons up here, though. My daughter had a play at her school. She was in The Lion King, so that was a thrilling adaptation of that Disney classic. Let's see. On March 7th, I was on a panel of mayors for the South Metro Denver Chamber of Commerce State of the Cities. It was over in Lone Tree. It was the Mayor Centennial, Castle Pines, Lone Tree, Greenwood Village, and myself there. We kind of talked to the business chamber audience about priorities for our communities in the whole South Metro region. Last week, I also chaired the Metro Mayor's Caucus Sustainability and Resiliency Committee. We had presentations from Denver Water and the Solar Energy Industry Alliance. They talked about House Bill 25-1096, which is an automated permit for clean energy technology. Real cool technology. However, the mandate from the state is that the cities have to use this technology, and it doesn't seem to necessarily work for all the cities or actually make things more efficient for some communities here. So I'm sure that passed out of the House Energy and Environment Committee previously. It is now in the House Finance Committee. We'll have a hearing on March 24th. And then upcoming things, this Friday at 11:30 on the 21st is the Fresh Market Community Kitchen ribbon cutting over in the Woodlawn Shopping Center. Following Thursday, March 27th at 1 o'clock is the Shea Lizeth first anniversary. Those are both Business Chamber events. And then Business Chamber, I believe, is also putting on a South Suburban Parks and Rec District Candidate Forum at Kiln, which is at 2650 West Bellevue on April 3rd at 5 p.m. So that's all I have. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I have several things to update on, mostly related to public comment, but I do want to start with some good news, just sharing with the council and the community that Denver Water has completed the first two phases of the water project, and that's the portion that's on Main Street. So we're very thankful to Denver Water and also our own crews for the way they work together to keep our businesses in the loop and have strong communication and just really to move that project forward. So we're thankful for that. I also might ask Mr. Atwood for a $2 bill because I believe that we're ahead of the March deadline. What's you?
I think he's saying double or nothing, Jim.
Thank you for your good-natured response there. So, turning to a much more serious topic, the city is concerned, and I was speaking with our police chief today just on the work they're doing to understand the trend of the swastika graffiti that we are finding. It's certainly disturbing to the police and to all of us too. So I know that our police are working with the rangers for South Suburban Parks and Rec to identify who is perpetrating that graffiti and to bring that to an end. Next topic, I'd like to just speak to the new brewery in town. It is an exciting new business, but the city certainly realizes the need to balance the needs of that business, which was permitted appropriately through all of the city's processes and did meet all of the city's requirements per our code, including parking through some of the arrangements that they have for parking. We certainly acknowledge that it's not enough parking for the demand that they're seeing now and potentially into the future. So we know that there is some balance, and we need to work with both the business and the neighborhood to make this work as Littleton Boulevard evolves with new businesses like this. I mentioned earlier, we're certainly first looking at the thing that we can control most easily, readily, which is the parking enforcement for what's there. And we'll keep looking into more solutions there and working with the business, whom I must say has been pretty responsive to our appeals and and our conversations about music and timing and other activity on their patio and outdoor areas. But our staff has spent many hours this week kind of working on with all parties to that challenge. I would like to just recap a couple of the points that we made at the last regular council meeting just about the Mineral Railroad Spur Trail, which is part of a larger project that there are two phases to that will provide some really important safety improvements at Mineral and Jackass Hill Road, and then all the way down to Santa Fe, and then across Santa Fe to make the connection with the Mary Carter Greenway much safer than it has been. So that's a really important project for safety. While certainly important, the trail section there is of a lesser cost component. Nevertheless, it is part of that project. So we know, we've been told by the federal partners that we have, state partners, that at this point, you know, that project was designed several years ago. We need to build that project to capitalize on the grant funding for not only the trail, but for that whole safety improvement, because we have about 5-to-1 ratio of federal and state funding to our funding. So it is an important project, though I will say that, you know, from what we're hearing and seeing now, there could have been more public outreach when the project was designed to make sure that all were informed. So Mayor, I think I'll stop there, and those are my updates.
Yep, thank you. City Attorney?
No report. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Let's see, moving along here. Item 7 are scheduled appearances. We have no scheduled appearances tonight. Item 8 is consent agenda. Consent agenda items can be adopted by a simple motion. All ordinances must be read by title prior to a vote on the motion. Any consent agenda item may be removed at the request of a council member. A, Resolution 20 of 2025, approving a second amendment to the intergovernmental agreement with Mile High Flood District regarding design and construction of drainage and flood control improvements for Lee Gulch at Broadway. B, Resolution 17 of 2025, approving a second amendment to the professional services agreement between the City of Littleton and David Evans and Associates, Inc. for design services for the Mineral Station East Mobility Shed Improvements Project Phase 2, City Projects Number 25-38. C, ID 25068, motion to approve the minutes of the March 4th, 2025 regular City Council meeting.
Mayor, I move to approve consent agenda items A, B, and C.
Second?
A motion and a second from Councilmember Riker to approve all consent agenda items. Any discussion, Council? Ready to vote?
Is green for go?
Green card is yes, red card is no. Everyone ready?
Wait, go again. Sorry.
Put your cards up.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Wasn't that fun? All right, item 9, general business. We have a couple items on general business tonight. First up, item A, Resolution 22 of 2025, approving a funding request for South Metro Housing Options Montview Flats. So I'm turning it over to the city manager to present this resolution.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'll just briefly just give a little background and introduce our guest tonight. About a year ago, the city agreed to support South Metro Housing Options plan to build 50 new affordable housing units. The city's funding, as we like to see it, is part of that capital stack, helping to close a gap with other funding sources to make a project like that happen. As you know, housing and affordable housing have been very high goals for this city council, high priorities. So now the South Metro Housing Options is very near their closing for this property, and some funding has shifted, and so they have another request for the city to kind of go the final mile to help close that gap to make this project happen. So with that, I'm going to introduce Corey Ritz, who is the Executive Director for South Metro Housing Options. He's joined at our table by Deputy City Manager Kathleen Osher, and they can speak to the need at this point.
So good evening, Mayor and members of council. Just a quick reminder. So our first contribution of $1 million was to help with the acquisition of the land for Metro, or for Montview Flats. And I think what we found in that was an opportunity to make their LIHTC application much more competitive. It is uncommon for a particular agency to have that opportunity to have LIHTC low-income tax credit, a successful application so close to each other. So our last two projects have been successful in that. So we do think that that was a big contributor to that competitiveness. So I have Corey here tonight to talk about what's shifted in terms of that capital stack. But I know that South Metro Housing Options has contributed additional funds as part of how they're moving forward and asking for the city to consider matching some of those funds to help push the project into completion.
Thank you, Kathleen. Good evening, council. Thank you for having me tonight. So when we conducted our joint study session in January with the SMHO board and staff and with city council, you all had asked what you could do to help SMHO meet our affordable housing goals. And here we are. I think that night we actually discussed briefly the need for Montview Flats additional funding and the potential for this gap. So for just generally briefly to overview the low-income housing tax credit program, what we call LIHTC, the tax credit equity and the permanent financing make up most of the capital stack, which always leaves us, even in the best of times, with a gap of several $1 million. That gap is filled by CDBG and home funds that are administered through the county, Colorado Division of Housing Funding, municipalities, in this case with you all, fee and lieu. Potentially, some other municipalities have tax, lodging tax, what have you, different means to help fill these gaps. So that's kind of where we're at right now with Montview Flats. We've ended up with a gap. So we've applied to the Colorado Division of Housing for additional funds. We've, as Kathleen mentioned, we've put in more funds and more cash from SMHO, but we do need some additional help to finish. We plan to hopefully close by the end of May and then break ground by the end of June. So we're wrapping up this part of the process, but we certainly are asking for your help at this point to finish the financial close.
I'd like to make just one more point for the council and for really the public. If the council were to grant this request, the funding would come from the city's housing fund, the revenue for which is the inclusionary housing ordinance fees in lieu, which are not general funds that can be used for other city purposes. So this is funding that is really intended for this purpose among a few that can help us drive the city's housing goals.
Just to be clear, the request is for $500,000 to contribute to completing that capital stack and then moving to close on Montview Flats.
We're doing some tag team here. There's currently $1.3 million in that fund available that could be drawn on for this purpose.
Council, any questions? Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I think you already alluded to how much funding was already in the fee and lieu pot for affordable housing projects, and this is not to say that this is not applicable. Did we have any other projects currently lined up for that 1.3 million that we would be making a balance of or a reallocation to this project?
No, there are no current requests. We are in front of council at your study session on March 25th to reaffirm that criteria of, we're really looking at the support of these funds to help stimulate projects that are 100% affordable. And so we do not have any current requests for that 1.3 million.
Okay, that's all I had.
Councilmember Driscoll, and then Councilmember Riker.
Kathleen, where did that $1 million come from prior?
So as part of the adoption of the inclusionary housing ordinance, there were projects that were...
Not the 1.3, the $1 million we initially gave South Metro Housing.
So that was a decision last fall by council, and so it was a combination of two sources of funding. So it was through ARPA dollars that had been identified to help support affordable housing, and those are those federal recovery funds. And then the second source of funding was $400,000 from the inclusionary housing ordinance.
Is South Metro Housing a public or private enterprise?
It's a nonprofit.
It's a nonprofit. And is it the city's responsibility to make up these deficits when South Metro Housing, or any entity for that matter, comes knocking on our door saying, sorry, we just need some more help? Is that our position on housing?
So our current collected funds through, so if you remember at the point of adoption for the inclusionary housing ordinance, there are two paths that projects can pursue. They can build 5% of their units affordable.
Right.
And manage those, or they can pay a fee in lieu. There were a number of projects that were already in process that council recognized that they were beyond an extent where they could basically pull back and redesign the project to accommodate that 5% of affordable units. So at that point in time, those projects, we anticipated based on the size and what have you, that it would be roughly $5.5 million, $5.7 million that would come in the form of fee in lieu. So we knew we'd have that source of funding. To date, council has approached how those funds would then be allocated based on projects that are 100% affordable. And so we've had a request in the past from South Metro Housing Options to support the acquisition of the land for Montview Flats. And then the conversation we'll have on March 25th is if there are other entities that, again, are doing 100% affordable, this could be a source of funding to help close those gaps. I think what we heard from South Metro Housing Options Board is it's incredibly difficult to bring these 100% affordable projects to fruition. And so they need a variety of different funding sources.
Just to answer, I think directly would be, yes, the policy is, that's why we set up the IHO.
Right.
Is to have these funds, is it every case? No, but I think that's, up to the council. And we said, yes, we have these funds. How can we help address
Well,
affordable housing?
just one additional question then, I know, Corey, you mentioned that, you've looked at some other ways to raise these funds, but I'm looking at your purchase of the property off of Littleton Boulevard. I'm looking at the building at Wells Fargo. Have you looked at refinancing that? This idea of coming back to the city for more and more funds, and grant, this is not taxpayer funds, so I feel good about that. But I just think we're getting into a habit of, I don't know, I'm 50-50 on this one. Any other things you've looked at to try to raise these funds?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, one of the reasons and why we initiated the repositioning of our formerly public housing units was we were able to create some affordable for sale opportunities, but then also in the sales of those homes, we're able to use those proceeds for the development of more affordable housing. So that's probably one of the biggest ways strategies we've taken over the past couple of years. But unfortunately, they're just the one way really to create new affordable housing is through the LIHTC program, and it is expensive. And we just end up with these gaps that we scratch and claw to find a lot of different ways to make it work. But we think it's important enough to.
Then how do you buy a vacant piece of property for future development?
So, again, in part, the proceeds from the sales, with these LIHTC deals, there is a developer fee. So the idea is that some of that money comes back from the tax credit partnership to, again, reinvest in additional affordable housing going forward. So each LIHTC partnership deal, that is another strategy to move it on for more affordable housing.
I'm going to jump in ahead of you, Robert, because I have a question to follow up on Councilmember Driscoll's question. So in the packet, there's a lot of information about the IHO and the city's funding, but not a whole lot on the specific project. Corey, could you tell us about how much this is costing and why there is a new gap?
Yeah, the overall project cost, I believe, is $23 million. About around 26 million. One of the reasons we are in this position.
And was that what you knew going into it, or did those costs increase?
They fluctuate. It was fairly consistent from the original. They always fluctuate to some extent. These gap fillers that I've talked about are unpredictable. So they're based oftentimes on appropriations either from the state or from the federal government. So CDBG and home, for example, are a product of congressional appropriations. Those are, every additional gap filler is competitive, very competitive. So that's always a challenge for us and any other affordable housing developer, that these pots of money are not generally large to begin with, and they're very competitive and unpredictable in terms of the amount available each funding cycle and going forward as well, so.
So how much, so you were expecting to get more CDBG funds, community development block grant funds, and you didn't get it. So what were you expecting to get, and what will you get? Do you know?
I believe we expected around 1.5 million, and we received 325,000. And those actually were CDBG funds through the city of Centennial.
So there was a $1.2 million gap there, and you made up some of that?
Correct. We currently have an application into the Division of Housing as well for an additional around 500,000 from them to help fill part of that gap.
So there is $1.2 million gap right now, and you're asking the city for 500,000?
Correct.
What happens if you don't get the other 700,000?
We always figure it out and make it work, and we will have to put more cash in from SMHO side, worst case scenario.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Reichert.
Looking at the attachment to the letter, the expected funds that didn't show up was the 925,000 from CDBG and another $500,000 from the home grant from Arapahoe County. And in response to that, SMHO increased their share by 1.1 million and has also asked for $500,000 from us and essentially $500,000 from the Division of Housing. So, you know, they did increase their share, and so.
Yeah. Oh, no, that was your comment. Councilmember Reichert, your comment, and then Councilmember Grove.
So, I support this, I'll vote yes for this, and I appreciate the work that South Metro Housing does to continue to make our community have diverse housing choices, so I'm really grateful for that. I think, you know, I want to kind of reflect back on why I think this is important, and first of all, you know, we during our missing middle housing conversation, I think a lot of us reflected back on our community survey that said affordable housing is the most pressing issue in our community. And then I think that's highly correlated with what we heard at the South Metro Chamber economic forecast, where Henry Sobenet said, you know, we're at the highest level of income inequality in our country in the last 50 years. And I think the challenge of affordable housing is going to be one that's going to be facing our community for a long time. And so I really appreciate South Metro's housing's efforts. And I want to praise this council and former council for their work. You know, South Metro Housing's been around for, what, 40 years? And I think that shows the foresight of, you know, councils many decades ago. But, you know, prior councils passed the inclusionary housing ordinance, and I'm really grateful for that work. And I think that helps set us up to address these challenges. But I do want to say, during our conversation, maybe later at the next study session, I want to continue to have conversations around how we work to preserve other existing housing. And we had public comment about Meadowood as one of those efforts that we are working on to preserve community housing. And I feel like we heard from Corey that maybe South Metro Housing is not the right tool for that during our study session because of all the problems that come with using HUD funds and purchasing stuff. But I just want to continue to pursue the question of how we maintain our housing. While I'm very grateful for this opportunity and will vote yes, I want to have more conversations around preserving our housing. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Councilmember Grove.
Yes, I know you're in the process of selling the homes, working with Habitat for Humanity. Has that process been completed?
We have approximately 10 homes left to sell
So
with that particular program.
Okay, so you have cash. You have, and you will have cash to fill in the gap. If we vote to approve this, you would fill in if you don't get that other grant. So what are you doing with the cash if you're not using it for this?
So I believe we talked about it at the retreat. We do have a pipeline, a development pipeline in place. And in particular, pre-development costs, before we're even awarded tax credits for any particular project or development, the costs can be extensive. So we have those pre-development costs and any additional potential opportunities that come up along the way in which we could purchase and create more affordable housing.
So that's what you're saving your cash for?
And
Thank you.
actively spending it, yes, on those pre-development costs.
I just didn't
Yeah.
understand if you had a bank of cash and you're asking for us, and you may have to use it for this other gap. I just kind of wanted to see where we're going and.
Yeah, and we're trying to plan, several years out as well, so we can continue, again, the momentum that we've begun over the last couple of years.
And once you sell those 10 houses, that will add to this amount that you have?
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other comments, council? Questions? All right, thank you. Is there a motion?
Yes, Mayor, I move to approve Resolution 22-2025, approving a funding request for South Metro Housing Options, Montview Flats.
Second.
There's a motion and a second from Councilmember Peters to approve Resolution 2022-2025. Any further discussion, council? Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah. Just wanted to say thank you for bringing this before us. I'm really excited to help hopefully get this over the finish line. Good luck on the remaining portions of your application. I think one thing that we also noticed during this conversation is that this was an unpredicted cost, and we are trying to make good on the money that we have already invested in this. But for lack of better terminology, the sea is kind of changing underneath all of us with regards to a lot of these federal funding sources for housing and community development block grant funding. It is both based on demographics and population and a variety of metrics that are constantly, that are regularly in flux, based on, census data. And if those allocations are going down for the county, for the major municipalities, we have to take that into consideration. That is not something we can continue to bank on in the future. We have in the past used it for things like sidewalk improvements in low-income neighborhoods and the like, because quite frankly, Littleton receives very little funding in this manner. But in general, it may not be a source of funding that SMHO nor the city can really depend on to be that flexible point of cash, and we may have to figure out ways to make up the deficit of not just this particular project, but future projects as well. So thank you for coming back to us. We want to make this project whole, so I'll be voting yes.
Other comments? I just want to kind of not reiterate, but what Councilmember Grove talked about, the city has a I won't say a pile of cash, money in a fund set aside for affordable housing, and this is a need and a use for that. And so rather than just sit on it, I think this is a very good use for those funds to help get a project off out of the ground here. So I will be supporting as well. All right, we have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 22-25. Remember, your green cards are yes, red cards are no. Put your cards up.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Director Ritz.
Thank you very much for your continued support of us and affordable housing. Appreciate it.
Item B under general business, ID 25070, 2025, legislative overview and consideration of potential city positions on legislation. I'm going to turn this over to the city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. As council is aware, may be aware, generally every year, city councils are asked to take positions on certain bills that are going around our state legislature, which could at times impact our local government. Historically, there's anywhere between 600 to 800 bills that are advanced in our state legislature, which runs from January through May of every year. This year, I want to say as of today, we're at around 600 that have actually been filed. A vast majority of those bills do not impact the city of Littleton, but we're certainly monitoring everything that comes through to determine what is being advanced, what could impact our city, and if given the opportunity, what are possible changes that could take place to make the bill perhaps more palatable for the city. So I spent a lot of time Googling that. I don't know if that brings back any memories for anyone.
Councilmember Zink says he's too young.
Maybe not. No.
I guarantee I saw the original version on my black and white TV in Craig when I was a little kid, so.
It kind of looks like Robert.
I'm just a Bill on Capitol Hill.
Anywho, getting into kind of a list of some of the bills that I wanted to talk briefly about. There's probably about 8 or 9 right now that I think council should be aware of, and if council so wanted, we could certainly put together.
Does council need to take a break before our city attorney gets into all these bills here?
No, come on.
No, he'll be quick. You'll be quick, right? Or should we take a break?
Look at this. I get one opportunity to speak to you all for the days and days of reading of
He has
these
a law
things. I'll be
degree.
quick.
He's required to speak a lot.
I thought I got paid by the minute. So here's a list of some of the bills we can go through. I will just tell you, to make it a little bit quicker, for me as a municipal attorney, one of the things that really bothers us municipal attorneys are those laws that impact local government. There is a long line of cases. There is the state constitution, which affords local governments the authority to manage a lot of their own affairs occurring within our city. Some of the things, I'm referring to are a lot of the land use issues. We generally try to push back, or hope to push back from a municipal level, when the state comes in and requires cities to adopt certain regulations, as we've seen in the past. One of the other issues that we tend to push back on is when they try to get involved with our local policing. The state mandates, the unfunded state mandates that impact our ability to govern our own city when it's purely matters of local concern are one of the triggers that gets a lot of municipalities within our city rightfully upset at what the state tries to do. You may think that all in all, some of the underlying, results or what they're trying to achieve are great ideas. As we saw with some of the land use bills, those weren't necessarily contested from kind of a policy standpoint amongst our council at the time, but it was really the manner in which they were trying to be imposed. Obviously, and I won't go back to that, but our council spent a lot of time addressing affordability, addressing land use issues here locally, and we did not necessarily need the state to come in to dictate to us what was appropriate and what was not. So, with that said, one of the items that's floating around is the Colorado Voting Rights Act. What makes this a little unique in the sense is it's modeled off of the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965. The Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965 is designed to protect discrimination, and at that time, if you'll remember, in our country's history, there were certain segments of the country that had more discrimination going on within their voting systems than others. This is an effort to impose some of these requirements on municipalities. What's interesting about this is it actually doesn't apply to state elections, nor does it apply to school districts or any special districts. It's really just municipalities. So some of the things that it does is it would allow for the Attorney General's office to come in and investigate any of our elections if there was a claim that there was some sort of voter suppression, voter dilution, or things of that like. We don't have a history of that in Colorado. And so some of the things that we don't like is, one, this is in the state constitution. It's specifically spelled out that we have the ability, municipalities, to run our own elections. And so this is kind of overreach from a state level making these requirements.
Yeah, Councilmember Reichert.
Does this bill, and I understand you've already said that it doesn't apply to special districts, but could this bill be modified to address the concerns that were brought up earlier around South Suburban's election being in an off year, off timing manner. I mean, I would 100% support all elections being at the same time.
So, and that's one of the concerns that folks have. When you actually read the legislation, it is unclear whether or not there would be a requirement for certain changes into the timing of voting. Not every city goes by, every odd year for some of their general municipal elections. Some may have differing points in the time where they have their elections, like in April. That's not unusual. But the fear, if you will, is putting this on, say, November, when you have a lot of statewide elections, is you end up kind of polarizing this vote. So in the sense that we have our local elections, we are not Republican elections, Democrat elections, but the fear is that by placing these elections at the same time, that it has the fear of actually doing that. So
Yeah, I don't share your fear. I think.
Yeah, that's the rationale for cities to not have on, municipal elections get lost down ballot and get drawn into a partisan debate here.
I think it's really hard to make that argument that the South Suburban election is anything but lost. And so moving elections to the same time and same place, it's not in our purview, and I apologize for causing conflict.
No, but I'm not saying that South Suburban, I'm talking, this is requiring municipal elections to be held.
Right.
Yeah.
No, but I would support, if we could get to the place where all elections were held every other year at the same time on the same ballot, I think that would be a great enfranchising measure. But that's not what this does, and so I'm sorry for the distraction.
It does for municipal elections.
Right, but we're already there. We're already.
For us, there are, but what the city attorney said, there are municipalities that have spring elections. And I think the cities have chosen to do that so they can have their focus on the municipal election.
Yeah, I don't think their argument for a focus on the municipal election is actually the focus in reality.
Fair enough.
Sorry for the disagreement, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to talk about this.
Continue, city attorney.
I'll cause one. So, back to ADUs. Why does this council not want to stand up to the state legislator and say, hey, let us rule our own city?
We're not talking about ADUs here, we're talking about right now. And we did oppose that bill last time. Continue, city attorney.
a second ballot issue that is, legislative item that is going around is House Bill 251169. This is the Housing Developments on Faith and Educational Land. This is also being referred to as YIGB, which is Yes in God's Backyard. And what this bill would allow is for certain educational institutions or certain religious institutions to build housing on their properties. Essentially, the prerequisites would be is that you would have owned the property for 5 years, be quote-unquote a bona fide religious organization or have one, and then you could go about and build residential on that property in conjunction with your faith-based center without having to go through any permitting process through the city outside of the building permit. But essentially, it would require every city within the Denver metro area, or within Colorado for that matter, to rezone their properties, rezone their maps to allow for residential in these specific locations. For the city of Littleton, it's probably not a huge impact because a lot of our churches are already within zoning districts that allow for residential to be built anyways. Concerns is that, one, again, we're talking about the state government coming in telling us what we should be doing in terms of our local land use control. Two, there are questions around the tax liability associated with it. There are questions regarding the speculative nature of people going in, purchasing a church property, getting them to build what it is that they want, and there's no requirement that a church actually hang on to that property afterwards. There is a requirement for who can do it, which is 5 years owning it, but nothing afterwards. So potential impacts to neighborhoods are a concern that have been voiced by a lot of municipalities in our state. That, by the way, would be St. Mary's in 1901. That would be at the corner of Nevada and Powers.
And for the record, this one just passed the House and is moving over to the Senate.
Yes. Yeah, this is, the fairness and transparency in municipal court is an issue, well, it's a legislative item that's going through. And it's creating a lot of concerns amongst a lot of municipalities within the city. Essentially, they are trying to model kind of a lot of the procedures that are happening in municipal courts and make them align with the same procedures that happen in county courts. Some of that we can certainly do. It will require a little bit of work, but we're already affording pretty much the same rights to individuals that are picked up on municipal violations as we would at the county court. You know, they're still getting a right to public defender. If it's a jailable offense, we're still doing advisements within 24 hours of a person being picked up on one of our warrants. So there is that. I believe where the biggest impact is setting of fines. And what this law basically says is that if there is a comparable state violation, that the city cannot fine someone or incarcerate someone longer than what the county would allow or what the state would allow. So let's just take petty theft, for example. So our city has a petty theft ordinance. We have our own municipal ordinances because it's easier for us to issue tickets within our own municipality as opposed to sending them all the way out to Arapahoe County and having Mr. Zink deal with those. The same goes for our traffic tickets. We issue thousands of traffic tickets. The purpose of our municipal court is to be able to process those here locally. And where this starts running a little afoul of our own court is where we start capping what fines are, where we start capping what jail is. For the most part, the municipal court is not running crazy with fines. I mean, this is not a way for us to raise revenue within our city. We do certainly issue fines as a way to offset some of the costs associated with our operating our court, but we are not raising any money by having a municipal court right now. So for example, one of the concerns would be the minimum fine is the maximum fine would be $300, or it would be 10 days in jail. That would be the max that we could do if there wasn't a corresponding state charge with greater penalties. Where we run into a lot of the issues are for certain things like code enforcement. Some types of violations, we will go ahead and we'll impose like a really large fine. And what we'll do is we'll suspend most of that fine based upon a person coming into compliance. So if we were talking about code enforcement, someone has just a ton of stuff, junk, trash, whatever it is in the front of their house. We tell them, you know what, you have to remove this. So what we're going to do, we're going to give you a fine. Let's just say it's $1,000. We're going to suspend 900 of that based upon you coming into compliance within 2 weeks, whatever the number would be. That would be something where we would no longer have the ability to do. So that challenges our ability to tackle those types of violations. Other types of violations which may be of interest to City Council, we may not have the ability to tackle those as effectively. So if City Council wanted to target, let's say, speeding in a certain location, speeding within our school zones, what we have to defer to is the fines that are set forth in state law, which are actually pretty low. So let's just take a straight speeding ticket. We would have to follow the schedule that is in state statute, which is, you know, it's probably about $80, maybe it's $100. Mr. Zink would probably know this, but it's probably like $120 for a 4-point speeding violation. That's 10 to 19 over the speed limit. State law doesn't take a look when it comes to traffic at whether or not someone has previous violations, if they have a terrible driving record and allow for any sentence enhancing, if you will, i.e., you're going to get a higher fine because you're not a great driver, or this is the third time that we've actually pulled you over on a Lottie or some other street within our city. We don't have the ability to do that under this law. And so that inhibits or challenges our ability to address certain locations within our city. It hurts our ability to actually fund our municipal court. At the end of the day, I know a lot of jurisdictions are wrestling with the fact of, you know, they're making it so costly to operate a municipal court. Why not just write everything into county court? I mean, what's the point? If the city's not going to retain any of the funds, if we're having to spend a lot of money just to operate a municipal court, and we can't actually target the offenses that matter to our community, what's the point? We'll send, you know, the 18th Judicial District another 10,000 traffic tickets a year. I mean, that's seriously the question that a lot of our jurisdictions are facing. Some of the smaller jurisdictions, probably more challenging. Some of the larger jurisdictions like Aurora, that would be challenging, and I know that would be super challenging on our state courts if they had to take on a greater role.
Councilmember Grove.
I understand what you're saying about the lack of flexibility and local control and all that. Does this have to do with pushback? It was a southern community, I think it was in Pueblo, where they were issuing these horrendous penalties that were very unfair.
I think that there is a different item to address that one, and that was the failure to appear, or holding people in contempt of court for failure to
Right.
appear.
This is not this.
It
Sure,
is
that played
not
some
this,
role.
but I think it is in part a reaction to that.
Okay, thank
There
you.
was one municipal court in Pueblo that may have been treating failures to appear as contempts or failure to pay as contempt citations, and was treating people pretty harshly. And I think that that led to a further focus on municipal courts and trying to ensure that no municipal courts were doing anything different than what a county court could do. So
So this is influenced by that, but this
I think it's
really-
influenced, yeah.
But doesn't address the issue directly. It's
there
more-
is a separate bill to address that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. There's also a couple court cases that are currently pending right now in front of the Supreme Court, which will give us a little bit more clarity in terms of municipal authority over local violations of state law. So if someone were asking me, should council be taking a position on any of the list of these, it'd probably be this one. I honestly think it's that important.
You're advocating not to support it.
Correct.
Oppose.
That's correct.
Oppose as opposed to support with amendments?
Correct.
Councilmember Zink has a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. So you mentioned the possibility of, like, maybe a municipality just shipping these off to state court,
Sure.
to the DA's office, like 10,000 traffic tickets, I think was what you said. If a DA's office was to say, well, we're not prosecuting these either, we don't have the capacity for this, or to set some sort of standards for, like, we're not able to take on an additional, 20,000 petty offense cases in a year, would that result, or could this bill result in a situation where many of these things aren't being prosecuted at all?
Correct, and I think we've seen that over time. I think our local policing has seen that over time. When it came to motor vehicle theft, that was something that challenged a lot of our state courts in addressing, and so you saw a lot of local courts take that on as ordinance violations. That has since changed, and it's back into the county courts, but correct. And I would say this, one of the arguments about writing stuff into county court is when you write something into county court, the county keeps that money. So for our local police officers, if we're issuing a fine out of our municipal court, yes, it's going to offset the cost of operating a court. It's also, it's all eventually going into the general fund in some way offsetting the cost of having policing within our communities. So there is a trickle-down effect. But yeah, it could lead to certain cases, backlog in certain cases in the courts, cases just being dismissed. We saw a lot of cases being dismissed because counties just couldn't handle the burden of that, especially during COVID. A lot of stuff got backlogged.
1060.
That is a picture taken from Edwin Bemis's windmill of our municipal court in 1906.
Bless you.
This could be like a history lesson. And
City attorney and an archivist. Please continue.
All right.
I'm not sure about the Al Capone charts earlier, if we want to get into that.
I thought Colleen would have problems with it. Vote early, vote often. These are all issues dealing with violating the city's home rule authority. So the electronic fence detection system, basically this is a bill that's being circulated which allows for electric fences to be considered alarm systems, i.e. that would kind of bypass the city's ability to actually, one, know about where electric fences are. That's kind of important to our police officers. Two, it would expand, it just creates risk and liability, public safety. It could be impactful.
So we would have no say on someone
aesthetics.
putting up electric fence next to a school?
Pretty much no. The automated permits for clean energy, this was the item that, one of the items that our mayor brought up. Essentially, this would allow for automatic permitting or automated permitting for photovoltaic systems. So if you're putting up solar panels, basically, the law would mandate that local jurisdictions have a way for a contractor to come in, get their permit, and have it approved, and be gone. The problem with that is, one, we don't actually have a system that works very well or interfaces very well with our current system. We don't, you may have seen something, but in speaking with our chief building officer, we haven't seen a system that can do this. Two, it's very challenging or impossible to know whether or not they're complying with any of our building codes, whether or not these photovoltaic panels could actually fit, or they're on the proper weight, load on any roof. So until we actually see the plans, it's hard to just automatically permit those. But again,
So with this, there's two software companies that do this. The one that presented to Metro Mayor's basically said it's the city would then have the ability to add all that information in and check it, and if it doesn't meet stuff, it kicks it back out. I know the city of Golden, when they looked at this, they said it was just, there's just more time and effort that's required to go in there. It actually doesn't save the city any time or money to do this, and there's a requirement to use one of these two vendors. And so I think
right,
that's.
and so it's not going to be more efficient on the city side.
Correct.
And with some of these bills, we just haven't actually seen a need for this. I mean, show us that this has been a problem. I mean, we'll get to the wireless telecommunication one as well. Tell us that this is a problem happening, and we'll address it like we will with any issue that comes to our city. But we have, apparently people want to put up electric fences, and then we want to put up, PV panels on our roofs, and that's, anyways, this hasn't been a problem in our city, so, and we don't necessarily like the fact that we're being mandated to adopt something, an unfunded mandate, again. So the wireless telecommunications system, basically this is when someone comes in, a wireless telecommunication facility, or they want to put in something and they don't get a response, then it's deemed automatically approved. This has not been an issue for us. We have not been delaying the processing of any permits by these folks. It essentially is conferring a special right on the wireless telecommunication industry, of which they have many, to jump in front of the line at the expense of potentially other projects that are occurring within our city. So let's see, the last one, I think this is the one that's probably more political in the sense that it doesn't have a direct impact on the city, but it is one of the few construction defect bills that are being advanced right now.
It's the only one now.
It's the only one now? There were 4 or 5.
Well, at least the two that were read today. One was postponed indefinitely.
Okay. So this is the one that is getting, this is one that is getting the most attention right now. And it's an attempt to try to kind of diffuse a lot of the reasons that developers tell you that they're not building, in this case, middle market housing. So when we think of it, probably townhomes, probably more so condominiums, those types of for sale options that we've seen not being built within basically the Denver metro area. I wouldn't say it's a Denver metro area issue either. It's probably more of throughout the United States, this has been a declining source of builds. And it's one of the greatest ways to generate wealth is through property. And so that's one of the challenges with that folks here in the Denver metro area find is, you know, it's either apartments or single-family homes that are far in excess of what they can afford. And so this middle market housing, missing middle as we refer to, is that bridge, that gap, that perhaps first-time home ownership, which allows someone, if they so choose, to go into single-family home ownership in the future. What it does is it goes through and makes refinements to our current construction defect statute, which is that state law. So it reduces some of the risk of litigation by adding some procedural safeguards. So it actually extends the statute of limitations. Right now it's 6 years. It moves it all the way up to 10 years to come in and file a construction defect claim. It provides a presumption, which is rebuttable, but it's a presumption against defects if the city issues a CO. So I have some kind of
CO
worry.
is certificate of occupancy.
Certificate of occupancy, which means you can move into the home. Congrats. I'm a little concerned that perhaps that makes the city subject to a little bit, you know, as a witness in a lot of these cases, but not overly concerned that we wouldn't be brought in. One of the complaints about the current construction defect law that is on the books is it only requires 51% of homeowners to actually initiate some class action construction defect litigation. This raises that threshold up to 65%. And so, and going through this and looking at it through the construction defect world, there are thoughts that this might help. Is this going to completely move that needle? I don't know. You know, I know that plaintiffs' counsels had advanced one of their own bills, which was probably not going to help the cost of construction. But yeah, the issue has always been developers not wanting to build here, or the argument has been to build this type of housing, condominiums, townhomes alike, because of the risk of really costly litigation.
Yeah, the argument for this one is that the threshold for litigation is so low that the insurance rates to insure these products is so high that people just aren't building it. They'd rather just build rental properties there. It also does allow the builder to remedy first rather than go straight to litigation. You can just sue right now without even having an option to fix the problem. CML is supportive of this one. I think they wanted a little bit of amendment. There's some amendments, but it's supportive. I think the gist of everything here is all the, this last one is the one, so we talk, Metro Mayor's Caucus, most thing we talk about is bills in the General Assembly. This is one that Metro Mayor's Caucus has supported. I know there are multiple mayors down at the Capitol this afternoon testifying in support of this legislation, and all the other ones, whether the Metro Mayor is officially opposed or unofficially opposed with all those. So I think that's kind of the idea. CML opposed all the previous pieces of legislation that you put up there, and this one, I believe they have amend position, but our support with an amendment. So I think many of these do not directly impact the city of Littleton per se, such as the YIGB bill, since our churches are in residential zoning. However, it changes the zoning that they have there. I would be happy to oppose all of those except for this one, just on the sheer principle, because when we look at the state stepping on home rule authority. Just because there's things we either like or don't like, they could do the exact opposite of say, hey, you're mandated to now do things that you don't want to do, even though some of these things, such as the election dates, to be required to have the state say you have to do it this way, and don't let the city have any authority whatsoever. Like when we opposed the ADU bill as a council in years past, it's the same idea that I think that I would be willing to have resolutions opposing the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But council, any other discussion?
I agree.
Councilman Reichert.
I feel like the construction defects one is the most important one to our future as a city. And so I would, whatever we can do to move forward the issue of creating more housing options for purchase, I think would be a good thing. On the other slate, obviously, I think I would like to see the voting one amended, and then I would support it. But in its current place, I don't support it, and then the rest
Generally speaking, just real quick on the voting one, CML specifically has said, look, if you want to put state elections in here, then they might support it, CML. But the fact that it's specifically targeting, this is specifically targeting municipalities and no one else is really where the issue is.
No, I agree. And I don't think municipalities are the problem. I think it's special districts, and so I think that's what I care about. But I'm not. So that feels like a big amendment to me and an unlikely one.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, to echo sentiment, the construction defect one, I have more of a strong position to be able to support that. I think it is winding back problematic legislation. Whether, to the city attorney's points, it actually moves the needle or not, I think remains to be seen. But at this stage, any little bit helps. As far as the opposition to the rest, I mean, I'm more strongly opposed to the municipal court bill than anything else, but would certainly be open to at least voting on it.
Any other thing, this side of the dais over here? Councilmember Zink?
Very briefly, I promise. Ditto. I'm on board for what we're talking about here, but and it sounds like I'm not going to have to beg anyone here, but I am extremely strongly opposed to HB 25-1147. I think it's unconstitutional. I think it's an overreach. I think it takes away tools that we should have at our disposal for our law enforcement agency in our city to be able to enforce the laws that our city laws the way that we see fit, whatever that may be. So I hope everyone opposes this. It sounds like that may be the case. But I thought that was worth saying. Thank you.
Councilmember Peters?
First of all, it would be helpful to me if in the future when we do legislative updates, you put on there how CML feels about it. I can compare, but I don't always read all their emails. And then also, I probably wouldn't be down to oppose all of them, but we could do that on a case-by-case, right? Or would we do it in a bundle?
I think we could have individual resolutions on each of them, yeah.
Yeah, the municipal court one seems like that has a ton of unintended consequences, but I don't know if I'm quite as much on board with just making the statement, so. Did you want to respond to CML?
CML opposes every one of these bills other than the last one.
Yeah, so are we, I heard support 1272 and oppose 1147. Does anyone have any issue with resolutions opposing all of them except for 1272 and going through and voting on that and seeing, or are there certain, I mean, do we want to, is there anything that?
I'm not opposed to putting up for a vote.
Okay.
In a future meeting.
So can we have some resolutions that, assuming any of them that won't be done by then, we'll have 2 weeks to go.
On all of them and one in support of.
Correct.
1272. Okay.
Okay. Anything else? All right, that's it for general business. We have no ordinances on second reading. And so with that, we are adjourned.